John and Oberg, thank you so much for joining us on the Plant Trainers podcast today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Very excited to be here.
We're excited too, and we wanted to hear your moment of gratitude.
Yeah, my moment of gratitude is really such a, I just feel so thankful and grateful to everybody out there who recognizes the cruelty that animals face in today's world, and they want to make a difference. And they actually take action to make a difference, whether it's through their own personal behavior and food choices, or encouraging other people to do that as well. There are so many people out there, and the numbers are growing all the time. And for people out there who think that everybody's only interested in their own self-interest and things that affect them personally, I have to disagree with them and say that there are so many people out there who recognize that what's going on behind the closed doors of factory farms and slaughterhouses is wrong and shouldn't be happening, and they're taking action to alleviate this suffering. And I'm so thankful and grateful to all of them.
That's awesome. And I mean, John, when we first found you on our Twitter feed, you popped in talking about all these animals and animal welfare. And recently we know that you came across your 10-year vegan anniversary, or however you want to say it. So congratulations. That's awesome. But let's go back maybe before that, and maybe you could explain to us how this all came about, because I don't know most people who would just wake up one day and say, oh, my life is now all about the animals. So how did you get to the stage that you're at?
I grew up an animal lover. My mom really instilled compassion in me from a young age. And even from when I was just this big, I remember, or I'm told that I was showing compassion to animals. My mom used to tell me the story about how I was sitting on one side of the living room, and we had an elderly cat named Muse who was sitting on the couch in a different part of the living room, and she rolled off the couch and flopped onto the floor. And my mom used to tell me that I crawled over as fast as I possibly could, and I just started petting the cat to make sure it was okay. And so apparently this was instilled in me from a young age, and that was all due to my mom. And my mom and I shared a really close bond, and she's really the reason that I came to love animals. And she and I did lots of animal saving actions together, but it was many years before I really learned about how farm animals are being treated. And it was interesting because I felt this strange sense of love and compassion and really passion for helping animals, yet I was also eating animals 3 times a day. And it took me until in my early 20s until I found out that if you love these animals should also be cared for, and the best way to care for these animals is through your food choices. And so when I learned about how farm animals are being treated, I said I don't want to support this anymore. But right from the get-go, I realized the scale of suffering is so large that by just being vegan myself, that's good and all, but there's so much more that has to be done. So many people out there who need to be influenced, just like I was influenced. And so that is why I work today to influence as many people as possible to adopt behavior that is more compassionate.
So that brings me back to an interview that we did with Dr. Melanie Joy, where she talked about the relationships that we have between our pets and the food that's on our plate, and the disconnect between, the pig who's on the farm that ends up on our plate and the dog that's by our side. And I just wanted to get your perspective on that relationship and what you think of that, and maybe help people understand the serious cognitive dissonance that's happening there.
Well, what's interesting is how people hear the word vegan and they think, wow, that's radical. That is so, on the fringe. That is something I could never do. Even I thought I could never do it. But really, all that veganism is taking these ethics that you would apply to the cat on your lap or the dog by your side, and apply it every time you sit down to eat. And so it doesn't require adopting some new radical worldview. It's just simply taking the ethics that we already have and that we already show every day to our pets and companion animals, and animals that we love and hold near and dear to our hearts, and applying that to farm animals.
Is there a way for people to make that connection without, I mean, yeah, they can listen to us talk about it, but how do we get that switch to flip and say, oh my God, that was a pig that's on my plate. It could very well have been a dog if I was in China right now.
Gotta watch all those pig videos on Instagram. They are so cute.
Yeah. So there's a variety of things that you can do. Being Canadian, you guys are probably well aware of Esther the Wonder Pig. Esther the Wonder Pig has been a great ambassador for all farm animals over the last several years, and has really gotten hundreds of thousands, probably millions of people to think differently about farm animals. And so what you can do is expose yourself to the animals that you're used to eating: chickens, pigs, fish, cows. Whether it's going to animal sanctuaries themselves and seeing them up close and personal, or just looking some stuff up on the internet. We live in the age of information. We live in the age of being able to find anything you want in a matter of seconds. And nobody in the history of humankind has ever lived in a world where we are so easily able to access so much information, and we should use that to the animal's benefit. Everybody out there who eats animals should do a couple things. They should look up how farm animals are being treated, and that involves maybe doing some reading about the standard practices, or watching videos. Go to my Twitter feed, or just social media in general, or YouTube, or just do some Googling. Learn how farm animals are being treated, because it is not the thing of fantasies that the meat, milk, and eggs industries would like us to think. It is far, far worse. And then if you feel compelled to change your ways, there are a plethora of resources out there to do that. Just Google vegan recipes and you will literally see hundreds of millions of hits.
So I think we bring up two different points here. Adam's point was kind of like, how do we start thinking of our chicken on our plate the same as the cat on our lap? And then you're also talking about, and what was big for you was learning how animals are actually being treated in the farming industry. So do you think that people are able to make that connection between, the pig on my plate or the chicken on my plate and the cat in my lap without knowing what's really going on behind closed doors in factory farming?
Yeah, look at your cat, look at your dog. If you don't have one yourself, look at your friends
YouTube
or families. Yeah. And just look and say, would I feel comfortable eating them? And if the answer is no, then that's your answer. Additionally, ask yourself, would you feel comfortable causing harm to them? And if the answer is no, then there you go. And it isn't just a matter of some philosophical thing like, oh, well, if you wouldn't eat one, why should you eat the other? It goes beyond that. Farm animals suffer in egregious ways from birth to death, whether it's castration without a painkiller, long-term confinement. So these are the kinds of things that should drive a person to feel encouraged to change, because if they wouldn't want their cat on their lap or their dog by their side to be confined, to be mutilated without painkiller, then they shouldn't do it to some animal that's off hundreds or thousands of miles away in a farm behind closed doors.
So how do you field the question of, but these animals are raised specifically for the purpose to be on my plate?
Why does that matter? What does an animal's purpose matter? It doesn't give you justification to cause suffering or cruelty just because an animal was born a certain way. If your roommate was breeding dogs And when those dogs, when that dog had puppies, he would just beat these puppies. Would that be okay because that was why he was doing it? That would not be okay. So why should we say, oh, but you know what? Farm animals are just farm animals. Pigs are more intelligent than dogs. Chickens are extremely, far more intelligent than they're given credit for. And even fish are far more intelligent than they are given credit for. And so farm animals feel pain and fear, emotions, sentience, just like the cats and dogs that we're raised with. So you really shouldn't, discount one just because they were born into this system.
So let's start to look at some of these animals that people don't necessarily realize are being tortured or are sacrificing for our well-being, other than, the regular pig and chicken and cow and what have you. So let's talk a little bit about sheep and wool, because a lot of people don't realize that wool wouldn't be a vegan thing. And if you're looking at my sweater, it's 100% man-made. Don't worry.
Yeah. The scale of which animals are exploited never seems to end. There are such a plethora of ways in which humans have discovered that animals are useful. And something I really try to hammer home is that animals are not just here for our use and for whatever they can provide us. I focus my efforts mainly on animals that are eaten because that is where the vast majority of suffering comes from. And I only have so much time on this planet to help as many animals as possible. And I'm really big on numbers in terms of helping as many animals as possible. So I focus my advocacy mostly on farm animals, especially chickens and fish and pigs, because those are the animals that are consumed in the greatest quantities. But certainly other animals are exploited in terrible ways. And so when you're considering making steps that are moving in the right direction for animals, you should also take into consideration things like sheep, where they suffer in numerous ways when they are raised for their wool. People have this tendency to think that animals live good lives except for when they are giving whatever they are being raised to give. So whether it's giving them meat on their bones or their milk from their udders or the wool from their back, they are being exploited usually basically from birth to death in terrible ways. And so for anybody out there who is concerned about this, just do some Googling. Just Google the truth behind wool. And if you are coming across websites that are written by the industry, by the wool industry, I would say go past them and try and find out really what's going on behind the closed doors. And if this is something you're not comfortable with, which it probably won't be, then stop supporting it, or at least cut back on how much you're supporting it.
So let's look into some of the animals that you are spending more time advocating for. We get the question very often, fish have good omegas for me and they're just pulled right out of the sea and then they die and they're frozen and they're put in the grocery store. So is it really that bad anyway? So let's talk a little bit about how wild fish might be exploited and why it's something that we should not be consuming.
Well, we are currently just destroying our oceans. There are, as we speak right now, there are thousands and thousands of massive, massive fishing nets just taking up everything possible in its way. And the industry does not care at all about the animals that die in the process. Fish have been shown to be far more intelligent than they're given credit for, like I mentioned earlier, and they've been shown to be sentient. So for a long time, people thought, fish, they don't really feel. That is false. Fish do feel, and they feel enormous amounts of suffering when they are pulled out of the ocean. Everything from from being slowly frozen to death because this keeps them fresher, to being cut open while alive. They are just exploited in so many horrific ways. And farmed fish isn't any better. In fact, farmed fish is probably worse. These fish are confined in such small areas. They're just so incredibly filthy and just full of so much suffering. These fish have sea lice, so they are basically constantly being attacked by lice. And these are just a small number of things that are problems with these industries. And I don't want to, horrify your audience too much so that they turn the show off. So I will stop there. But I just want to say that, long gone are the days where, animals suffered very minimally. Today, in 2019, farm animals suffer worse and in greater numbers than they ever have in the history of humanity. And this is a problem that we need to address.
Well, our world population is growing. It's growing here in North America. We're eating more per person than we ever have before, which is creating a society that's overfed and undernourished. And there's a lot of pressure on these farming industries, whether it's fish farming or animal farming. There's a lot of pressure on these industries to provide for us. And they're told to just go out there and do it by any means. And you see that, sea lions and dolphins and whales and all kinds of animals that are slowly becoming extinct for various reasons are being caught in nets, and they're not just nicely being thrown back into the ocean, right? Like, what is, I'm assuming, because of what I've seen in some videos, and you can tell me, they just kill them because it's easier. And it's, they don't have to deal with getting them out of the nets or anything like that. That's correct, right?
Yeah. They, the bycatch, which are animals that are caught up in the, like not on purpose, but they're just like in where the nets would be. They are often killed or gravely injured and then just tossed overboard to die a very slow, painful death. So, yeah.
And then there's also the effect on the environment. So we have all of these rigs out there that are leaving pollution behind, whether it's from the oil or whether it's from things that they're throwing overboard. And that's continuing to pollute the ocean, which is then polluting the fish. And it's this whole cyclical travesty, really.
Exactly. And there are people out there who care about the environment. And when I say people, I don't mean a few people on the fringe. Almost everyone cares about the environment, just like almost everybody cares about animals. If you take a survey of people and ask, do you support animal cruelty? At least 97% of people on average say no, they don't support animal cruelty. So that goes back to what I was mentioning earlier, where I'm saying this is not a fringe thing. We are not on the fringe. We are the mainstream. It's just a matter of getting the mainstream public to make this behavior, a la veganism, mainstream, because that is just getting our behavior to match these ethics that we already have. And the environment is facing such a drastic catastrophe, and a lot of that is because of animal agriculture. Animal agriculture is the leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions and the leading cause of environmental destruction around the world. Yet almost nobody wants to talk about it because the industry is so powerful that they would rather have you focus on plastic bottles and plastic straws rather than the chickens, fish, cows, and other farm animals that are responsible, because the industry does not care about the long-term suffering or destruction of the environment, of climate, or of animals. They just care about profits.
So do you think that these there's a really big straw thing going on right now, right? So Starbucks isn't really giving straws anymore, and places are giving paper straws, and everybody and their sister are making these promo things for their business that are your own portable straw, like the plastic straws. Do you think that that is just a distraction from the bigger picture, and it was created for a reason? Is there a conspiracy there?
I'm not going to go as far to say as that there's conspiracy, but what I will say is that it's an easy way out for people. And it is an unfortunate reality that plastic straws only comprise maybe 1% of plastic pollution in the ocean, yet discarded fishing nets make up about 50%. And so by getting people to focus on just plastic straws, they are missing the real problem. It's just like, why focus on just spaying and neutering cats and dogs when you have 10 billion farm animals being killed in the United States every year? We need to focus on where the biggest areas of suffering are. And in terms of animal suffering, by far, the biggest area of animal suffering is farm animals, and especially chickens and fish, who together make up well over 90% of the farm animals that are killed every single year.
Good. Now, so earlier you said you didn't want to gross out our audience, or that's not the wording you used, but I'll use that. And it's not like we're going to show them the documentary Earthlings, although that has a very big impact on a lot of people and can be very influential. And we talked to Scott David, who was an undercover investigator from Compassion Over Killing, and what he had to do was go into these factory farming situations and video record what was going on, and that was how he was able to help show the inside so people could then make their informed decisions. How do you make a difference in what you do, and what do you do to help bring these messages to light for people?
Well, first of all, a huge shout out to Scott for doing that important work. Undercover investigators are some of my heroes and some of the people who've done the hardest work of all of the movement, and they don't get enough credit. And so if it wasn't for their hard work and their tireless work, and for them and the organizations they represent, these images wouldn't be seen by the public. And again, we live in the internet age. We live in the age of information and videos on social media. And so people are able to see this content and make changes accordingly. And you mentioned Earthlings. Earthlings is actually the film that made me go vegan. It was my final straw, as we might say. And and that movie was so powerful because of the undercover footage that it showed. And so what I do, I focus on social media animal activism. Back in the day, I used to walk around on street corners, on college campuses, and hand out pamphlets that talked about vegetarianism, veganism, how farm animals are being treated. I handed out almost 500,000 leaflets in several years for vegan outreach, and traveling around North America. I traveled to like 35 U.S. states, I think like 5 or 6 Canadian provinces, handing out these leaflets, trying to make an impact. And then I started doing social media activism, and I discovered that I could reach so many people through social media that I couldn't reach on a one-to-one basis. And so for the last year, since I left the last organization that I worked for, I've been focusing on making as much of an impact for animals as I possibly can by utilizing social media. And so I have really upped my presence and efforts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram particularly. And in the last 10 months, I've had over 200 million impressions of the posts that I've put out there on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, because of the impressions of these posts really make a difference. And I mentioned I went vegan because of Earthlings. Well, back in 2009, 10 years ago, I think I downloaded copy of Earthlings and watched it on my computer. But not everybody has the liberty to just do that, or just will just come across that film. And so by using this tool that everyone is already on, social media, it's as simple as getting these hard-hitting photos and videos in front of as many eyes as possible. And by utilizing social media strategically, each one of us has the power to really create so much immense change for animals and change in the behavior of individuals out there. Almost every single day, I'm getting messages from people saying, I went vegan because of your work. Thank you so much. I never knew about how these animals are being treated. And I'm not a magician. I don't have a PhD in social media science. This is just something anybody can do. Get the message out there. Utilize this tool that's already at your fingertips.
So you brought up a good point, because all along while you were talking, I was thinking, how do you know that you're reaching new people and actually making a difference and not just preaching to the choir already? So of course, getting feedback is definitely a good way. Are you putting out paid advertisements? Are you friending everyone and their brother to try to get more eyes in front of it? Like how are you doing that?
My social media strategy is, or
what you're willing to share, at least.
Yeah. Well, I'm not doing paid ads. All those views are organic and free of charge. And it's really seeing what works on social media and what doesn't, and just doing more of what works. And over time, that just builds on itself and builds on itself to get as many eyes on this content as possible. And I can guarantee you that the vast majority of the views of the content that I'm pushing out there are not from people who've already followed me or already opted in. I would say Instagram, a greater portion of the posts that I put out there are seen by people who've already opted in to follow me because of the way that Instagram is structured. But with Twitter and with Facebook, the share button or the retweet button on Twitter gives the opportunity for your posts to be seen by other people. So if somebody, if Becky follows me on Twitter and she likes my tweet and she retweets it, all of the people who follow Becky will see my tweet. Well, not all of them, but the people who see Becky's tweets.
Non-vegan friends will see your information and therefore say, exactly, holy monkey, I need to pay closer attention.
Exactly. So of the 200 million impressions from 2019, I would guess that at least 150 million of those are from people who are not already vegan and who otherwise wouldn't have thought about that issue that day.
Right. So what kind of content do you put out there that you find makes the most of an impression? Is it the images of you out there on the field saving animals, or is it being all nice and cuddly with these farm animals at a sanctuary, or is it the brutality, the videos of these animals being beaten hard and dehumanized? Like, what kind of content are you putting out that you notice really makes an impact?
It's certainly a combination of content. And if you were to look at my Twitter, for example, you wouldn't see just a string of a bunch of the same types of posts. I really try to add variety so that I'm keeping the audience guessing as to what's coming next and constantly interested. And so I may post a picture of me cuddling with a cow on Friday. And then on Saturday, I may show undercover footage of a duck farm. And then the next day I might show, a great vegan burger that exists. And then the next day I might go back to undercover footage. And the idea is to mix it up, to really understand what your audience wants to see and is interested in, and pushing out as much content that they're interested in as possible, while also putting the stuff in there that's, really, really important to your cause.
So it sounds like you've kind of got it figured out. And I know that, social media is always changing and people are always changing. If somebody listening wanted to make an impact using social media on their personal pages, for an every now and then, they didn't want to turn their personal page into like complete activism, but they wanted to do something that would make an impact or at least strike enough interest, what would you recommend for them to do?
Cool. Well, I do have my own social media consulting business, should anybody be interested. But short of that, something you can do is just implementing the message that you want to get out there, whether it's promoting veganism or whatever your cause is, in little ways, subtly over time. Something I would recommend is not, bombarding. Something I would, let me start that over. Something I would recommend is to not bombard your audience with this message over and over and over, because people are going to tune you out. They are going to stop listening if you just hit the message home too hard, too often. You're going to come off as a zealot and out of touch with reality. You want to be a normal person. And the vast majority of vegans out there, even animal activists, they may be very passionate, but they aren't thinking strategically about how they use social media. And to be honest with you, less is more. Maybe posting about a sports event that you might be interested in, maybe something that your kids are doing, and then maybe talking about how farm animals, or how you feel about farm animals, and how you feel about vegan food. Mix it up. Don't always hit the same stuff. Just like I'm not constantly posting undercover footage or constantly posting, cuddly footage. You've got to really mix it up to keep your audience interested. Otherwise, you're going to burn them out and make them disinterested.
So I noticed on your Instagram, you were talking about vegans being seen as weak. So when I saw this, I kind of thought, okay, why do you think vegans are being seen as weak when clearly, Game Changers just came out. We're always talking about, Patrick Baboubian, and really the work that we even talked about, Compassion Over Killing and all these undercover investigators doing. Those are not weak people. So why do you think we have this stigma?
That's a good question. And I think in 2019, the tables are starting to turn a bit. And I think Game Changers is a contributing factor to that, which is incredible. And I'm very happy about the existence of this film. But for a lot of years, meat has been so tied with masculinity and strength, and which makes no sense for a number of reasons. For one, it is very easy to be strong on a plant-based diet, and so that is just completely a myth. And I think also one of the reasons that people think like this is because of the protein myth. Thinking, obviously meat is protein, and so you need lots of protein to be strong. And people think, oh, you're not going to get meat, you're not going to get protein, you're not going to get strong, you're not going to have muscles, you're going to be weak. And that is something that we need to combat, because that's obviously not true. But to go even further, I think it goes beyond just physical. It's actually mental too. And people think that choosing to not eat animals is like wimpy. And that is just complete and utter garbage. I think that what is strong is the willingness to look at how farm animals are being treated and say, despite the fact that almost everybody out there is continuing to support this, I'm going to go against the grain. I am going to take a stand with my food choices. That is strength. That is will. And that is the message that we need to get out there, is that vegans are strong. They are not only strong physically, but they're strong-willed, and they are. And I think that this old stereotype that vegans are weak needs to be turned on its head 180 degrees.
I agree, and I love that answer. I want to pull us back into the beginning when you were kind of talking about your story and how you said that some people are choosing their activism through the food choices that they make and eating healthy, and some people are doing it by putting things on social media, and some people are doing it by going to visuals. And you weren't very aggressive, and using that word purposefully. You weren't very aggressive in saying vegans need to do this in order to call themselves vegan. It seems that you have a very open mind into how people can do what feels right for them, what's comfortable for them. And yes, we're all a little bit uncomfortable with a lot of our choices at first. It's uncomfortable saying, oh my God, I'm going to give up cheese when I'm completely addicted to it. But you're not making it seem like there is a prescription for how to be vegan and when you can call yourself vegan, and that we're all working together as advocates, whether we're coming at it from a health point of view or from an activist point of view. And I want to applaud you for that. And can you expand on that a little bit more to make some of our listeners who might consider themselves plant-based and might still have that really negative outlook on veganism because of the people that are way too aggressive in the way that they're treating other humans?
There's a really great quote that I like from Jack Norris that goes, "We don't want a vegan club, we want a vegan world." And it's important that we make the vegan umbrella as wide as possible, bring as many people in here as possible. It is important to mainstream our message. In order to make an impact for animals, we need to make veganism, plant-based eating, accessible to so many people and mainstream. It cannot remain on the fringe if we are going to keep up with, overpopulation and population growth. It cannot remain on the fringe like it has been for so long. And it's already starting to enter the mainstream. And we need to get it to enter the mainstream. And by doing this, we need to be open and friendly and meet people where they are, not where we want them to be. There is no one way to be vegan. There is no one way to be an animal rights activist. There's lots of different kinds of activism out there. And I recommend getting it, just doing a variety of things and seeing what speaks to you, and then asking yourself, is what I'm doing effective for animals? Because we all have an opportunity cost. When we're choosing to do something, we're choosing not to do something else. When we're choosing to say something, we're choosing not to say something else. And so for me, I found that although I loved leafletting, I loved handing out vegan pamphlets, focusing on social media outreach is where I can make the far biggest impact. And maybe somebody listening to this, maybe they're a really good cook. I am not. Maybe they are a really good cook and they can win people over with their awesome vegan burgers or their vegan tacos. Maybe somebody else, they have a little mini animal sanctuary, and by encouraging people to come visit the sanctuary, that is a way that they make a difference. Find what work speaks to you and go with that. And then above all else, be kind. Don't be a jerk. When is the last time any of us saw someone being a jerk and said, I want to be like that person? Nobody. Never. We don't operate like that. And so there are some vegans out there who do make up the fringe of veganism, who have loud voices. And their animosity and their frustration and their hostility is not doing the mainstreaming of veganism any good. It is, in fact, doing harm, and I think can be counterproductive. So while there are lots of different kinds of activism, and I encourage you to dip your toes into different kinds of activism, do keep in mind that turning people off from veganism is a real risk and something that should be avoided. And if you just look at the work you're doing and ask yourself, is this effective or is this not effective? And give yourself an honest, as much of an objective answer as you can, that will be doing a lot of good for the animals, because it'll help direct you in terms of where you should be focusing your efforts.
John, you have such a great perspective on all this, and the way you put out your messages is so open and honest, and we really appreciate that. And because of the way you do that, I think our audience is going to appreciate it as well. And they're probably going to want to know where they can connect with you and get more information from you. So can you please share some of those places for us?
Absolutely. So I would love for your audience to connect with me on social media. My handle is John Oberg, JOHNOBERG, on Twitter, Instagram. On Facebook, it's John Oberg Official. But beyond that, I would love Patreon community. I have a Patreon page, which is how my work is funded, and you can sign up for as little as $5 a month, and that $5 a month adds up to allowing me to focus full time on this work. And then on top of that, by signing up, you get some extra benefits regarding me and my work. And so patreon.com/John Oberg. So that's patreon.com/John Oberg. You can sign up there. That would be the best way to reach out to me. And I'll send you a message afterward. And I'm sure you'll include some other links here. But yeah, social media and Patreon, best ways to get a hold of me.
Amazing. We have linked to those in the show notes at planttrainers.com, so everybody can definitely find them there. Again, thank you so much for not only your time today, but for what you're doing on a global scale for the animals, for the earth, and for our future generations and for us. And it's incredible. So thank you so much for being so dedicated.
Thank you guys for doing the exact same thing. You guys are doing amazing work. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Really appreciate it.